February this year, Animals Australia released footage taken from 4 abattoirs in Indonesia, 2 of which were approved under the new Exporter Supply Chain Assurance System. That footage showed the 37 breaches of OIE standards for the handling and slaughter of cattle. The export industries involved, International Livestock Exports and Northern Australia Cattle Company, were fined and are now under more strict control and audit, and were also required to provide welfare officers in all the remaining abattoirs they supply to. Their export licence was not revoked. August this year was a huge year. 30,000 cattle were exported to Egypt for slaughter, and on this day, more than 6 weeks later, as far as I'm aware, those 30,000 cattle are still in the feedlot awaiting the decision by Egyptian authorities. They suddenly have a problem with the hormone growth promotion implants. These cattle were inspected and approved for export by Egyptian authorities before they left Australia. The Al Shuwaik left Fremantle and an Australian winter in August, and on arriving at its destination in Kuwait, the 55,000 sheep on board were delayed from unloading, contrary to our moratorium of understanding with that country. On the 1st of August, the Ocean Drover behind us left Fremantle and an Australian winter, and after dropping off 53,000 of its 75,000 sheep to 200 consignments, it arrived at its destination in Bahrain with 22,000 sheep on board, which were denied permission to unload. This is a Mediterranean summer where temperatures soar above 40 degrees. That was subsequently rerouted to Karachi, Pakistan. We have never exported live animals to Pakistan, and that begs the question, how do the exporters source a reliable, SCAS compliant facility to process those sheep in such a short amount of time? As of today, 52 days after they left Fremantle, they are still in a feedlot up to their knees in mud in hot and humid conditions in Pakistan. Last week, it evolved that tens of thousands of breeding cattle, sheep and goats were exported to Al Awad Farm in Qatar. These breeding animals are not protected under the Exporter Supply Chain Assurance System. Of 10,000 sheep exported there in February, only 3,000 are still alive. Heavily pregnant cattle died prolonged, horrific deaths from starvation at first, and were unable to nourish their newborn calves who suffered the same fate. Just this week, Indonesia has rejected the shipment of 11,000 breeding cattle, demanding a breeding line history for all the cattle, which is impossible to supply. This is an industry that Terry Redmond, the WA Minister for Agriculture, wants to see grow and prosper into the future. This is an industry that Joe Ludwig, the Federal Minister for Agriculture, thinks has a bright future. This is a barbaric, dirty, deceitful industry. It is unreliable and unsustainable, and it is based on cruelty to and abuse of animals. It is a blight on Australia's international reputation. It is harmful for the Australian economy, and above all, is ignoring the welfare requirements of millions of animals that should be under our care. The only party to promise to commit to banning this industry is the Greens Party, and I urge you to keep that in mind when you vote for the next federal election. Now I'm going to hand you over to Linda Curran and Elsie for the Greens.
Good morning and congratulations for not sitting down and taking it. Today, each one of you have demonstrated by coming out here at the last minute that this issue is a significant issue in Western Australia, and it's not just for the farmers. It's a significant issue for everybody who cares about how we treat animals. And in particular, it's the animals that we ask the ultimate sacrifice of their lives for our food. So whether you come because you just heard about the cruelty, because thank goodness the media is finally taking this seriously, or whether you've come like me because for years you've known that this is the wrong thing to be doing and that we've got to turn it around, or whether you've come because you were on Facebook and you saw the messages that were going out that said something was going to be happening at the port, and finally, once and for all, you decided you were going to stand up and do something about it. I want to congratulate you because you are the beginning of change. And I can tell you from the last time we had a flash mob, we are about 5 times bigger. Now, as Katrina said, I have the most amazing job. I represent the Greens in state parliament, and for the people of South Metropolitan Region, every day I stand up and I speak out for the policies that the Greens have developed over the years. One of those policies that we developed back in 1996 is ban live exports. Nothing has changed except for the growing evidence against that trade. Yeah. We remain committed to seeing an end to live exports. And it's fair to say that by joining the Australian Greens, the West Australian Greens have brought that policy to the federal level. And now, every one of those 9 senators who sit in the Senate are committed to ending this trade. They speak for you. Now, the woman who's taken over for animal issues in the Senate is a senator from New South Wales. Her name is Lee Rhiannon. She is a tough campaigner, I can tell you, because having survived the New South Wales Parliament for some 12 years, I believe, she has established herself in the Senate already as a strong voice against live exports. Yay. And in the last national meeting of the Greens, Lee put forward a motion that we would, as the Green Party, support campaigns on World Animals Day. World Animals Day is coming up on the 4th of October. And what I'm going to ask is that we use that day together to send a message about live exports to Colin Barnett.
Let's protest again. Do this again.
Because the other point is that yesterday, as Katrina said, Terry Redmond, who is a national member in the Barnett government, is the Minister for Agriculture. And was it only yesterday? I asked him in Parliament about this ship, about the ocean drover that is over in the port now. And I said to Terry Redmond, I said, how do we know that that ocean drover is going to ports that are accredited by the new stringent conditions of the federal government? And how do we know that the animals, once they reach their destination, are going to be treated in accordance with the rules and regulations that we've finally put in place at a federal level?
We don't.
And he couldn't answer that. In fact, what he told me instead was about a vessel that just left this port, which created a stench in Fremantle for several days, which was called the Genna. And the Genna, with cattle, left for ports, various ports in the Middle East. And anyone who is here and saw that vessel, it is about 1/3 the size of that one. It's one of the old converted car carriers. It looks rusty, it's old, it looks like, you know, you just hope that they don't have a big swell out there in the seas.
Fully enclosed?
And it's almost fully enclosed.
Almost, yeah.
And what we know about vessels like that unload at various destinations, is that at each time, the level of suffering increases. And there are people here today who know exactly what I'm talking about. People who have read the reports that have detailed that any time you stop and unload, there's increasing stress on those animals. Now, the minister couldn't tell me how many ports, he couldn't tell me which ports. All he told me is various ports in the Middle East. And we we know from what Katrina just said that from these cool conditions, it's going to be about 18 degrees here today, they're going to go into 40-degree temperatures in the Middle East. These animals, which have acclimatized to our seasons, are moving in the most dramatic fashion from this climate into the summer of the Northern Hemisphere. And that is another thing that we know causes the ultimate stress on these animals because, of course, they have a little bit more protection for them, and the sheep would have a little bit more wool. And they're moving into a climate that's going to be hot, it's going to be humid, they're going to be in need of more water. And what we know is that when they suffer in that way, they are more likely to develop disease and, in fact, to die of starvation. They die of inanition because they do not eat, because they're so in such discomfort. Now, this can't be changed, really. This is inherent cruelty. This is why we have always said that live exports must be banned. And really, if we wanted to have some concession to the farmers, we would say, okay, we'll ban it at the end of this flock. You know, when this flock is mature, like maybe 1 year, we'll give you 1 year to transition out into a time where you can organize your family budget around something else. But the fact is, we want that ban in place. And it's the minister's job to work out how to do that for the farmers. And in my question yesterday, I said, have you directed your agencies or your department to develop the lucrative halal meat export market? And I said, because I ask him this every time in budget hearings, I said, how much have you invested in developing these alternative markets? Surely you can see the writing on the wall that this trade is about to end. What have you done for the farmers? And you know what he said? He said, well, this is a competitive industry, and they work that out all the time, and, it'll be cool, it'll be fine. That's something that they work out all the time. In other words, this government has done nothing to prepare the farmers for the transition to the end of the trade. And that is to their shame. Now, you've achieved quite a bit at a federal level in getting these regulations tightened up, in getting the federal government, and we have to give due regard to the local member, Melissa Park, who has worked to get those. I don't think Melissa's here today, but is someone from her office here that wants to say something? Okay, well, the local AOP member, Melissa Park, in the federal seat, has worked diligently to try to end this trade. I know she's committed to that. Unfortunately, her party's a little bit conflicted, and she's having some difficulty getting that policy through. They have worked to increase the regulations, and we do give them good credit for that. As part of that, recently a federal delegation visited Fremantle and talked with our counselors, with the Fremantle City Councilors, and one of them is here today, and his name is Andrew Sullivan. And I've worked alongside Andrew for many years on many campaigns, and in fact, we've chosen him to be our Greens candidate in Fremantle for the state election. So I want to introduce you to Andrew, just to briefly give us an update on the meeting that he had this week with the federal investigators that were looking at how this trade is being conducted. Because the more informed we are, the better armed we are. Because you've talked to those people in the supermarkets, and you've talked to your friends and neighbors, and they say, well, yeah, but how can you ban it? And isn't it unfair? And we need to know these arguments, because not all of us have that value system which says innately this is wrong. We have to talk to people who don't actually get it. We get it, but some people need those explanations for exactly how it's going to happen and exactly what's going on. And that is the reason why we're empowering ourselves with this knowledge today. So I'm just going to invite Andrew just to say brief words, and then maybe Katrina can wrap it up for today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lynn. First of all, just as is tradition with our council, I just want to welcome you to Fremantle and thank you for being here today and acknowledge that we're on Wajak Noongar land and that we respect their elders past and present. As Lynn said, this week we had a delegation from the Feds to come and just ask the Fremantle Council what we thought about the live sheep trade, and also the focus was primarily on the systems of inspections that they have here in the port and also internationally. I think they were a little bit surprised because I don't think they thought that the Fremantle Council or local government would think very much about such things. Of course, our council has already said that it does not support the live sheep trade coming through Fremantle. But more importantly, we also don't support the government's attempt to move the ships down to Kwinana, where they'll be out of sight and out of mind. We actually take the view that people need to see, they need to hear, they need to understand exactly what is going on here and what is going wrong. The interesting thing is that when they asked us what we thought, as I said, they were a little bit surprised by what they heard. I know I said to them, well, actually, my parents had a farm. We used to raise sheep. We used to, in fact, even sell sheep for shipping. That was a very long time ago, and I'm not necessarily saying that was something that people in those days knew about. Most farmers, as we know, actually really care for their animals. They would be shocked and horrified by what happens to them when they get on those ships and go overseas. And I know that most farmers back then had no idea what a shipper actually turned into when it got onto the ship. They just took the pride in producing a really high quality animal that was loved, that was cared for, that was at the peak of its existence. And then it gets put on one of those ships and gets to virtually, as Lynn said, starve itself. The reason they only take the peak animals is because so much of the trip and so much of the journey of the experience for the animal half destroys them by the time they get there. They're not in peak condition when they get to the other end because it's so traumatic. As someone that grew up on a farm, I also knew that when shearing time came around, the shearers and the farmers would never want to see a sheep in those holding yards for more than about 24 hours. These animals get put in trucks, driven all the way up from the south into these ships, there for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then if they get stuck in a port in Pakistan or Kuwait, it gets even worse. So, the public needs to understand that they need to see exactly that is what's going on. The thing the delegation told us was that one of the problems they have is they don't actually have enough resources, enough human resources. If two of these ships were to come in at one time, they don't have enough vets, enough staff to actually do the monitoring that they say that they're going to do. We actually asked them, well, the ships are here for a week or so sometimes. How many monitors do you have and how regularly are they there? And they said, well, every ship is monitored. When we asked what that meant, it meant that there might be an inspector there for 4 hours of the entire time that the ship is here. Now, if that's what they mean here, imagine what they mean elsewhere in the world where we're not watching. So we said to them, well, that's not what the public expect. The public expect when you say you're going to monitor, that you're actually going to keep an eye on exactly what's going on every day. They don't do that. The other thing that we talked about with the delegation was very much what Lynn was talking about, is, well, what are you doing for the sustainability for the farmers into the future? Why is it that government isn't working on, isn't supporting the industry here in Australia to actually create the replacement industry for those farmers, for the 30,000 people who actually work in this industry? The government is not doing virtually anything to ensure that the abattoirs here haven't gone out of business. So many of the abattoirs have already closed because of that government inaction, and yet they're trying to make the system of live export somehow validated by having more monitors or the like. They're putting the money in the wrong place. They need to be putting the money into the area that will actually be the future for farmers, not the past. So from the Fremantle Council, they got a very clear message that what they're doing is unacceptable to this community in Fremantle, and I'm sure, hopefully in time, completely unacceptable to the whole of Western Australia. Yes. Thank you.
I'm not going to say any more except thank you all for coming down, for showing that you give a shit. The Australian federal government will not listen to the will of the people and will not ban this industry. So I say the only option is to increase the Greens' majority and let them have a bit more influence on the decisions that this federal government makes. Thank you again for coming down. We're all really happy with the turnout. There will be a big bridge event, another human chain across the Fremantle-Stirling Bridge in November, on the 18th of November. Keep your eye on the Facebook page for confirmation of that. And if you're not already a member, please go to Stop By next